Hey, this is HH Law, and I'm John Henderson. Today we are talking about automobile and truck accidents. All right, when you are involved in some sort of auto collision, a car accident, truck accident, anything on the road, you hear lots of commercials about this, but I'm here to explain today exactly what's going on with these cases. We're going to talk about fault, who was at fault, and why that matters. We're going to talk about insurance. We're going to talk about damages. We're going to talk about general rules of negligence. And we're going to end this video by talking about what is a good case versus a bad case in the state of South Carolina. So the first thing is determine who was at fault in an auto accident. A clear example of this is if I'm driving down the road and a car comes up and boom, rams right in the back of me. Clearly that is going to be an instance, that rear end accident is an instance where the car behind me who rear-ended me is at fault for that accident. However, there could be scenarios where it's not so clear cut. If the facts are that I am driving down the road and the other car has been behind me for, let's say, 10 seconds or more, then clearly that's the case. But what if I swerve into somebody's lane at the last second and slam on brakes to try to make a left-hand turn? Under those circumstances, then we're going to put a question mark out there. The rear-ending car is going to say, I had no time to stop. So you're going to create some question mark in that circumstance. A lot of the accidents that we see are intersection-related accidents. Somebody is taking a left, and the car that is coming from the other direction maybe is speeding, going 15 or 20 miles above the speed limit. So the person taking the left thinks that they have plenty of time, but for the other person speeding, they would have. And so that creates a question mark as to who is at fault as well. Most of the time, however, it's very clear which party was at fault. And generally speaking, if the other party is labeled at fault, then you are probably going to be able to recover in most cases. That is not always the case because we're going to talk about something called comparative negligence here in just a minute. But that is generally true. And so where do we look? Who makes that determining factor? Everybody has heard it said before that if you watch an auto accident or watch any event unfold, that everybody's going to have a different perspective about that. Especially true when you think that your insurance rates might go up, or if you think that you're being labeled or assigned at fault or somebody else might be. Everybody gets in a very defensive posture under those circumstances. It's not always the case that everybody is going to be factually truthful. A lot of times, even if someone isn't lying, they're admitting certain facts about the case. But most of the time, we're going to look at a police report or other incident report from law enforcement. In South Carolina, that can be called an FR10, which is like an insurance exchange form, but also places liability there. The police officer will follow that up with a police report as well. Increasingly, there are dash cams in lots of vehicles. People have them for various purposes. There's also cameras located in intersections in a lot of places as well. And sometimes we look to those as well because a police officer might say, I don't know, I'm getting two different stories here. I have no idea who pulled out in front of the other. And so they don't know, and they will mark both is contributing or neither is contributing to the accident just because the officer wasn't there and wasn't a witness on the scene. And so can't really say. It's just really evaluating based on his or her experience. And so another place that you might look is witnesses, people who were not interested parties in either vehicle or if somebody else pulled over on the side of the road. And usually law enforcement will talk to these people who were around and witnesses and make sure that they get at least a hold of their information in case there is a dispute over these things. The next issue that we've got to talk about is negligence. So a car accident basically is trying to determine who was negligent. It's a straight negligence case. And negligence in law is different than what we use as our normal vernacular, like, oh, somebody was acting negligently or that was negligent. We use that term a little more loosely in our day-to-day conversation. But to lawyers, and when we're talking about negligence, there's a strict criteria. We have to prove that there was a duty for somebody to act. We have to prove that the at-fault party breached that duty. We have to prove that there were damages involved, and we have to prove that the breach of that duty caused those damages, actually caused those damages, so that they are related. So just because somebody did something that, broke a law, if it doesn't relate directly to the actual damage that was caused, then that wouldn't necessarily be negligence. So in the instance of a car accident, following too closely behind somebody, you have a duty not to do that. You have breached that duty by speeding or following too closely or pulling out and failing to yield or various other things, that you have breached that duty by violating traffic laws. And then somebody else is injured as a result of that, then you have all the elements there of negligence. But you have to have all those elements of negligence. It can't be that, hey, I rear-ended somebody and there was very, very little damage to the car, and now the person in front of me is claiming that they tore an ACL in their knee, when in fact I know that they were coming from a softball game and they had a big ice pack on their knee. You see there, in that instance, the damage that they're complaining of was perhaps caused at the softball game and not caused by the car accident. And so we have to make sure that it relates back. And this leads right into the next section that we've got to talk about. Once we understand who is at fault and whether or not there's negligence in play or not, then we're talking about damages. When we talk about damages in a personal injury case, you're talking about, what are the medical bills? What are the future medical bills? Is there any scarring, lost wages, pain and suffering? There's an assortment of different things out there that could qualify as damage in an automobile accident. Mostly we're talking about the injuries, however, the medical treatment involved. Sometimes you'll have to get a life care plan if somebody is seriously injured from a medical expert to tell us, what is the ongoing care going to be like? We have a number of cases, for example, where people they're disabled for the rest of their life and they're going to require some sort of future care. We've got a gentleman right now that was involved in an incident and he's now in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. That kind of thing is going to require future care, and it's very expensive. So the at-fault party has responsibility for paying for that to the extent that we can prove liability in that circumstance. And once we determine the damages involved, a lot of times the litigation around automobile accidents surrounds around what injuries are actually related to the incident. And so we've had lots of cases over the years in which neck injuries are a subject of litigation. And so we could have had a client that went to the hospital complaining of neck injuries, then maybe followed up with a chiropractor or some other medical professional who says, look, there's something much more severe than soft tissue injuries going on here. Client goes back to the hospital, maybe gets an MRI or something like that, and finds out that they need a neck surgery. So then the question becomes whether the neck surgery is related to aging, spinal degeneration, something in that world, or is it related to the actual blunt force trauma involved in a rear end accident? And that becomes tension between, we've got to figure out, and that's where lawyers are deposing doctors and deposing the clients and deposing and trying to gather as much evidence as possible to try to determine if the damage complained of is actually related to the automobile accident or something else. Was it a pre-existing injury or not? So the last big topic that we need to talk about is insurance. So who pays for all of this stuff? In the automobile injury world, insurance is usually the place where these medical bills or lost wages, pain and suffering are paid. So that if a car causes an accident, somebody else causes an accident with me, that we're going to be looking to their liability insurance to pay those medical bills, the medical bills that I've incurred in pain and suffering. But sometimes that car doesn't have insurance. If that's the case, then at least in South Carolina, I am required to carry additional coverage on my policy that would kick in the event that I'm involved in an accident with somebody else who doesn't have insurance. This is in South Carolina, not mandatory, but there's also something called underinsured motorist coverage that would kick in the event that the car that hit me doesn't have enough insurance, that my insurance can come in. And then there's some other forms of insurance as well called PIP and MedPay that might chip in to pay some medical bills as well. So there's an assortment of different insurance options out there available in automobile accidents. All right, so what's the difference in a good case and a bad case? Some automobile cases or automobile accidents really require a lawyer to help try to solve and figure it out. I would say parking lot cases are probably not great cases. That kind of thing, you bump into somebody else in the parking lot of a grocery store, for example, nobody's injured. No lawyers are needed to figure that out. Or if you have just strictly property damage, then no lawyer is needed to help figure that out. But if you're severely injured, if liability is clear, that person over there is at fault, that they meet the elements of negligence in that car accident, like it's very clear that they broke some rules of the road and that's what caused your injuries. And then you really have damages involved, like you've missed some work, maybe a surgery, or even not, it could be just soft tissue injuries and you couldn't get out of bed for a week and had to receive chiropractic care or some other sort of rehabilitative care for several months in order to get back to your pre-accident life. That is a situation where you probably need a lawyer to help negotiate against the insurance company because they have lots of lawyers. They have very professional adjusters who are trying to battle against you. And really the way that the law works out is when two adversaries are battling out against each other, they meet somewhere that is what we call fair or just. I hope that helps explain the nuts and bolts of auto accident liability, car wrecks, and all the rest of it. Remember, these videos are filmed in South Carolina. I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and so this is South Carolina specific information. However, these rules, the laws, what we're discussing apply to many, many states in many different instances. I encourage you to seek the counsel of a lawyer in your state if you have an automobile accident at all. I'm John Henderson. Thanks for watching.